Hello. Thank you for coming. My name is Ofe Keila. I'm from the Department of Spanish, Portuguese, and Latin American Studies at the Hebrew University. And it is a big pleasure and a privilege to join you today for the Spanish movie night and talk about one of my favorite films, Women on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown by Pedro Almodóvar, Mujeres al borde de un ataque de nervios. I will mostly speak English, but I will try to give you a little taste of the Spanish as we go along. And also feel free to interrupt me if you have questions. We can also do the questions in the end, but feel free to interrupt me. I like digressions. So today I'm going to give you a little talk about this movie. We will start with a short socio-historical context, because in order to understand Almodóvar and his movies, we need to get a glimpse into Spanish history and to specifically understand the dichotomy between Francoism and La Movida. Somebody here speaks Spanish? Very good, and you will help me and you will correct my mistakes. And then we'll talk about the life and work of Pedro Almodóvar. And finally, we will discuss a little bit about the themes and topics of the movie. So let's begin with the Spanish Civil War. How did we get from here to here? Yeah, how did we get? First of all, what is this movie about? And how does Almodóvar manages to counter almost 40 years of dictatorship, of homophobia, of discrimination against women? How does he manage to counter all of those things with a movie about breakup? And finally, how has this movie by Almodóvar really become a cult icon for the gay community in Spain? Let's jump into it. So first of all, I want to talk with you a little bit about the Spanish Civil War. This is one of Spain's darkest episodes historically. It was fought between the Republicans from the left wing and the nationalist rebels from the right wing. It was a very, very bloody war. A lot of atrocities were committed, mass executions. Here we see a picture of people who were captured during the fighting. Until today, it is an open wound in Spanish society. People are discussing it until today. It is estimated that during the Spanish Civil War, around 500,000 people died. So it's very important, it's very significant in Spanish history. By the end of the Spanish Civil War, the nationalist rebels, they win. And they are led by Francisco Franco. And Franco becomes the dictator of the Spanish state, and he will rule until his death in 1975, so almost 40 years. Now the Franco regime, first of all, it was very intolerant toward the opposition. It was basically a dictatorship with totalitarian and fascist features. So very homophobic. They actually created and devised laws against homosexuals. It was also very discriminatory against women. Women were considered inferior to men and treated accordingly during the Franco regime. And it really repressed the opposition, both politically and culturally. So a lot of freedoms that we enjoy living in a democracy weren't really given to the people. However, by 1975, Franco dies, and Spain moves slowly from a dictatorship to a democracy. So democratic elections are being held for the first time in many years. The government institutions are reformed and restored, and Spain becomes basically a parliamentary monarchy with a democratic constitution, and all the rights and liberties are restored. And then we have a cultural phenomenon that is accompanied by this transition to democracy, which is La Movida. La Movida is like the scene. So they call it La Movida Madrileña. It is like the Madrid scene. And La Movida is a cultural movement that represented exactly the opposite of the Franco regime. So we have a more open views about sexuality, about LGBT expression, more liberty, and also a rise of a lot of new forms of art. So we have the rise of punk rock in the 80s. We have daring cinema and literature, and Almodovar is really the key representative of La Movida. So when we watch his films, we always need to think about this dichotomy between Francoism and La Movida, and think about how Almodovar creates his films basically against this dark past of Spain. Now let's talk a little bit about the life and work of Pedro Almodovar. We see him here.
Before that, any idea why this La Movida was so short-lived, only 5 years?
Sorry?
Why it was so short-lived, why it lasted only 5 years?
The Movida?
Yeah.
So the Movida continued, but it was like I put the years because it's considered to be like the first period.
Yeah.
It was like a burst of, thank you for the question. It was like a burst of music, literature. Of course, it continued, and Almodovar also continued to create his movies, but during this period, it was like a blast. Suddenly, a lot of punk rock, suddenly a lot of literature, and it was a true renaissance in this sense, a true cultural boom. So Almodovar is a film director, a screenwriter, and an author. He was born in 1949 in Castilla-La Mancha, which is in the geographical center of Spain. And it's interesting because another very important protagonist of Spanish culture came from Castilla-La Mancha, Don Quixote. If you read the novel by Cervantes, Don Quixote de la Mancha. Yeah? So when Almodovar was 8 years old, his family was very poor, and his parents wanted to give him education, so they sent him to a boarding school, a religious boarding school, and in hopes that maybe one day he will become a priest. Now Almodovar, let me tell you the short story, he did not become a priest, but he did become one of the most famous and most successful Spanish filmmakers, both inside Spain and internationally. He was a key representative of La Movida. We said that La Movida is characterized by new music, open views about sexuality, about drug use, more liberties, freedom, and all of those elements really characterize the films by Almodovar. And in addition to those characteristics, we can see a lot of love and desire, relationships between people as a major theme in his movies, a lot of sex and sexuality. Also a lot of melodrama, dark humor, because when we laugh, in Almodovar's film we laugh, but we don't laugh about nice things. We laugh about depression, we laugh about suicide, about overdosing. So these are a lot of dark topics, but they are treated in a very humorous perspective in the movies. And also very complex narratives and parody and pastiche, which I will discuss with you later. We will understand these two concepts which are very important for his films. He established his own production company, El Deseo, the Spanish speakers, Desire. So you can see from the name of the production company what the movies are about. Yeah, a lot of desire, a lot of emotions, a lot of urges. He received numerous awards. He received the Academy Award, 2 Emmy Awards, 2 Golden Globe Awards, multiple Goya Awards, so a lot of awards. He was very well received by the critics. And he directed 25 feature films, which is a lot, among which we can see The Flower of My Secret, La Flor de mi Deseo, All About My Mother, Talk to Her, Volver, The Skin I Live In. Have you seen some of those movies? Well, today you are going to watch his breakthrough movie, Women on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown, really the movie that puts Almodovar on the map, because he did a couple of movies beforehand, but this is really the movie that makes Almodovar known not only in Spain but worldwide. So let's talk a little bit about women on the verge of a nervous breakdown. It is Almodovar's first major success, both critically and publicly. So the critics love it, the audience loves it. It premiered at the Venice Film Festival in 1988 and became a huge hit, both in Spain and also in the US. It's the first time the people in the US really see the films by Almodovar. It received numerous awards, and until today it is considered one of the best films by Almodovar and also one of the best films in Spanish cinema. This movie is a dark comedy and a breakup comedy. So the movie basically revolves around Pepa Marcos, who is she is a voice actress, and she is at the beginning of the movie she is abandoned by her lover Ivan, and during this movie she sets up to try to find Ivan to tell him something very important. We don't know what until the end of the movie, and throughout the movie she comes across a series of weird characters, of weird situations. She meets her friend Candela, who is in love with a Shiite terrorist, and also she meets Ivan's son, Antonio Banderas, whom she never knew, she didn't know he existed. Let's see the main characters of the movie. So we have Pepa Marcos, depicted by Carmen Maura. We can see her here in the black, in the red jacket, and the voice actress says she was abandoned by her lover Ivan, depicted by Fernando Guillen. We have Candela. Here you can see her in the black dress, and interesting, the actress is from Andalusia. She is from Malaga, so you will hear an Andalusian accent. And she had an affair with the Shiite terrorist. We have Carlos, depicted by a very young and handsome Antonio Banderas here. He is Ivan's son, and he is also engaged to Marisa, whom we see here, but he becomes attracted to Candela. So we will have a lot of erotic and amorous triangles in the movies by Almodovar, a lot of schemes and romantic issues. We have Marisa, depicted by Rosy de Palma. She is Carlos' fiancée, but in the middle of the movie she drinks a gazpacho. Somebody knows what's a gazpacho? It's like you can describe it as like a cold tomato sauce, but it's much more than that for Spanish people. It's very tasty. The thing is that it's not a regular gazpacho, but it's a gazpacho spiked with a lot of sleeping pills. And Marisa is going to drink it unknowingly, not knowing it's spiked, and she is going to fall asleep during the entire movie. I hope nobody else here will fall asleep, even if your gazpacho is not spiked. And finally we have Lucia, depicted by Julieta Serrano. She is Ivan's ex-wife, who was released from a mental hospital and now swears to take vengeance on Ivan. And we will see that the woman who takes vengeance and the powerful woman is a very central topic in this movie. We see her here, wielding double pistol, yeah? Let's talk a little bit about the main themes of the movie. So I told you this is a comedy about breakup. Of course, the main breakup is Ivan breaks up from Pepa, but we also have other breakups during the movie. Candela flees from her lover once she realizes he is a terrorist. And also Marisa and Carlos will probably break up by the end of the movie, and we will see why. But it's also a movie about, I put here, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So this movie is filled with sexual innuendos, filled with drugs, and also a lot of violence. So Pepa has the bright idea of making a gazpacho, but putting a lot of sleeping pills inside of it. She wants to give it to Ivan, so he falls asleep, but eventually Marisa drinks it and falls asleep, and Basically, she has an incredible erotic dream during the movie, even an orgasm, and meanwhile, her fiancé, Carlos, he starts kissing Candela. And Candela, she is with the Shiite terrorists. So we have a lot of intricate sexual and romantic relationships. But we also have a lot of violence. Peppa, she's ready to be angry. She throws, throughout the movie, several objects from the window. She throws out her phone. And these objects, they hit very specific people when they get out of her apartment. So, very karma, you know, karma is a bitch, etc. Women protagonists. Now, this is a very important point. As opposed to the Franco regime, which discriminated against women, made them treated them as inferior to men, here Almodovar puts women at the forefront of his movie. With the exception of Carlos, all the protagonists of this movie are women. Women are the ones who think, the ones who feel. We get a glimpse into their inner world. They are the ones who drive the plot forward. They are the ones who carry the guns. Yeah, they are the ones who get also meaningful insights during the movie about themselves, about the world. Yeah, the journey of Peppa after Ivan breaks up with her is a journey of recovery from the breakup. But this recovery also entails self-discovery. She understands herself better, and she also gains insight about her relationships, about the world, about who does she want to become during this movie. Metatextuality. Almodovar's films always talk about cinema and talk about themselves. And Almodovar always engages in a dialogue with cinema in his movies. So it's like two mirrors you put in front of each other. I can give you some examples. So for example, Peppa, I said she was a voice actress. She dubs movies. And one of the movies she dubs is about romance, about a guy and a girl breaking up, and parallelly she has the breakup in her own history. Also, a couple of policemen appear in one of the commercials on the TV, and later two policemen, they appear in real life in Peppa's apartment. And also, Almodovar's mother appears in the movie giving a news broadcast, and I challenge you to see if you can find Almodovar's mother during this movie. And finally, it's Women on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown is really a collage of genres. So we have romance, we have comedy and dark comedy, we also have a lot of action sequences and also a detective story. And Almodovar, sometimes he imitates those genres, but sometimes he parodies them. So it's like a mix between parody and pastiche. Parody is defined as a work of art that imitates another work of art, but with a critical distance. So we see, for example, a scene which we think it's like romance, but something is off, something is not right. Maybe it's exaggerated, maybe there are elements that are not supposed to be there. And pastiche is imitation without critical distance. So it's like a work of art that tries to be as similar as possible to the object that it imitates. And throughout the movie, and this is one of the biggest trademarks of Almodovar, we as viewers, we will not be sure if what we see is serious or is it a parody. I will give you an example. So at the beginning of the movie, Peppa, she is heartbroken because she was abandoned by her lover. And she packs the suitcase of Ivan with all of these things to give it to him. And she finds a duck, like a duck statue that he gifted her. And she starts crying and she says, who gives a gift, who gives a duck as a gift, you know? So in this moment of ridiculousness, but also of tragedy, we as a spectator, what should we feel? Should we relate to the pain of Peppa? Should we laugh about the ridiculousness of the situation? I haven't mentioned that she also burns her bed in this time. So what should we feel? And this complex reception of movies by Almodovar complex reception for us, the viewers, this is what makes his movies so interesting, because we as viewers, we don't know exactly how to feel. Now, before we start the movie, I want to talk about the LGBTQ angle, which is very important. So this movie has really become a cult movie for the queer community, both in Spain and internationally. This movie was released in '88, but until today, the queer community, they watch this movie, they rewatch it, and they quote it daily, from several of the very iconic phrases of the movie. So I wanted to give you some phrases and translate them to you, and also give you a little taste of the Spanish. So for example, this is what Pepa says. She says, "Estoy harta de ser buena." I'm sick of being good, which says, it's like, it symbolizes that now she is going to be a little bad, and she's going to do bad stuff. Also, Candela, when Pepa talks with the policeman, Candela says, "Que pico tiene la Pepa?" which means Pepa, she has a mouth on her, yeah, she can speak. And this is interesting because, in the Franco regime, women were not allowed to speak out. But Almodovar, he gives free reins to his feminine protagonists. He allows them to speak up, to say what they feel, and this is one of the ways in which Almodovar really counters Francoism in a very sophisticated way. And another famous phrase, "El mundo árabe, ¿cómo se ha portado conmigo?" This is what Candela says after the Shiite terrorist leaves her. She says, "The Arab world, he treated me so badly, And the last one, "En esa moto no se sube otro chocho más que el mío," which means, on this motorcycle, no other pussy will climb except for my pussy. And of course, "Bienvenido al Mambo Taxi." Now in Spain we have radio taxi, which means just, a taxi. But there is a very special taxi throughout the movie, which is the Mambo Taxi. Here we see him. This is the Mambo Taxi guy, and he's depicted by Guillermo Montesinos. He is really one of my favorite characters, and I think that we should definitely pay attention to him. So this is all. Thank you for listening. I hope it will help you to better understand the movie, and let's have some fun with it. Any questions you want to ask? Yes, please.
Perhaps one, why LGBTQ community then and not feminist community instead? Because the phrases sounded like phrases which women would say, which was in the movie, so why?
It's interesting. I think that the LGBTQ angle is very, very much connected to the feminist and to the feminine angle. At least for the queer community. It's also very feminist, the movie, but they also, Almodovar is a bastard, because he also makes fun a little bit about feminism, because there is one character in this movie who is the lawyer, and they all call her a big feminist, but she doesn't exactly act accordingly. But it's an interesting point, thank you. Other questions?
Can you give me an example of the difference between parody and pastiche in a different context? Like, give me a...
Yeah, so for example, we can take Don Quixote, for example. So Don Quixote, he wants to be a knight, he wants to defend the poor, like a chivalric romance from the medieval, But Don Quixote comes and, there are no giants, so he fights the windmill. So this is a parody. Mm-hmm. And pastiche is like really trying to imitate something. A pastiche can be, for example, it's like, I don't know, the clothing, like Adidas, something that really tries to get close, even though it's not romance, but it tries to get closer to it. In the movie, we have a lot of moments where, for example, we have a detective fiction scene brought from the detective genre. So we have Pepa, who is sitting, and she tries to find Ivan, and we hear the music. The music is like very film noir. Dun, 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 dun. So we are invited to imagine the genre, but also it's a little different because Pepa is no detective. Pepa is a heartbroken lover, So this is like So Almodovar really plays on the thin line between parody and pastiche. It's very hard to understand exactly where he is.
I'd like to comment. In the Department of Communications, they say that parody is imitation for the sake of criticism, and pastiche is imitation for the sake of imitation. So in today's media, you see a lot of references for their sake. You know, pop culture references and stuff like that. It's not criticizing pop culture, it's just referencing it for the sake of the audience. You know, recognizing it, and maybe you know, it's a recognizable kind of thing that kind of maybe draws the audience towards the art.
Yeah, and we will see that Almodovar really wants to, thank you, he wants to invite us to feel like we are in a romance movie, but then to slap us. It's not exactly romance, you know? So, thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the movie. It's not very long, it's 1.5 hours, and I think you will enjoy it. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.